Hi and welcome. My name is Ali Hart and I am the host of this podcast, and you're listening and watching How to Build a Creative Business in a Noisy World. I really hope you enjoy the episode. Hi everyone and welcome to the Hindsight series. Today I have Owen Crane, who is, I would say, a good friend of mine now. We first met, he's laughing, both in the creative space.
Yes.
So I met Owen when he was the pastor of CFC. I can't even tell you what CFC, something fellowship church.
Christian, I think. Yep.
There you go, Christian. That's well, we went there to be fed spiritually. Anyway, it was a great time when Michael and I went. Our kids called it the Fun Church, but that was where I first met Owen, and then through Sharon, who is my PA, and then also my husband Michael had met Owen many moons ago through his teaching at school, which is a school in Belfast.
Time ago. Yep.
But anyway, today this podcast is about building a creative business, and even though we've been off-piste a little bit, but also it's been really relevant because I like to spotlight people. Today I am talking to Owen because you will also know I've mentioned him and his him being an author in previous podcasts. So he's a writer, creator. I would say he is one of the sound people that I can soundboard things on without judgment, but also with enough kind of critique that it gives me a lot to think about. So I know today he'll be able to offer that wisdom to you, my listeners and viewers. So Owen, you are very welcome.
Thank you. You're fab.
Was that okay?
That was awesome. I was amazed already. It was brilliant.
You were like, is it me?
Who's that? I don't recognize that person. Imposter syndrome lurking.
That's it. Well, this is the space to own it. So tell me then, do you want to do a little line summary yourself, your own kind of introduction if you want? Kids, family.
Kids, family. Okay, so married 22 years this summer to Anne, 3 kids, all kind of fairly grown up now. So 20-year-old daughter and then 2 sons, very soon to be 18, have an 18th birthday, and lockdown is slightly interesting for him. And then a 14-year-old lad. So it's like having 5 adults in the house now. I thought,
so your baby is 14.
Yeah, my baby's 4, and you know, in the last year he's grown like 6 inches. His voice is broken. He's like filled out. It's like, oh dear Lord, what happened? What happened to my sweet little boy?
Yes,
he's still in there. You have to go digging though, but you can find it through the kind of like too cool for school. If you go digging, you can get him.
Yeah. So, and I imagine third born as well. He's a little bit more like, you can dig all you want, Dad, but I am. No.
Exactly. The other 2 insisted he's spoiled, but I was the youngest of 3. So I understand what it's like to be the youngest child, and we have it worse than everybody else. So
you've got his back. And brilliant. And then, so day to day, what are you doing then right now?
So stepped down from the leadership of the church. So I'm now freelancing. So I'm in a kind of exploration stage. So doing some writing some children's books, writing my second young adult novel that's going on at the same time, helping some people communicate, some blogs and LinkedIn SEO stuff on that, put together a communication course to help people communicate their message better. So we're building a long-line community around that, writing for some children's TV work. And
the writing's been there for a long time, hasn't it? I know we'll be able to go through your journey, but the writing's not new. The publishing of the novels, or self-publishing.
It's not new, but it was almost like a hobby. It was something that I didn't take particularly seriously. I just did for the crack. Like I wrote the first book just for the kids. Just give the kids something when they were younger.
Can I just say as well, this is not a book that's, 3 chapters long. This is a proper
70,000 words, which is, for me, the longest thing I ever wrote was like 5,000 words for university. So to write something that's 70,000 words, bonkers.
But also, that was the other thing I always felt amazed with you. I know it's like me with paintings, right? That's just, I always talk about when I'm mentoring people, you go for you hold on to what you're good at and just hammer and tongs, do it.
Yeah.
I don't, and also effortless, because whenever you're good at it and it's what you do, I don't mind saying that. And same with you, 70,000 words is like for me, but that you would know the chapters and all before you write them, wouldn't you? Something like you would.
Yeah, I would do a almost like a flow chart in my head, like on paper, of like, okay, this happens and this happens and this happens, and then they go here, and that's the fun part of it. That's the, you know, working out how do we get this character into this situation, and then how do we throw as much chaos and danger at them as possible, and then how do we move the story along, and that's the bit I love. Then you have to edit the blooming thing, which is
and so then tell me then, because just off air we were talking about you doing a business degree, is that right?
Yeah, did business management degree at Manchester.
Where are you from, by the way? Not North.
From a tiny village about this big. It's like I was in Jamor yesterday. My in-laws are just moved.
The size of a pea, by the way.
For those listening, it's tiny. It's like smaller than Jamor. So I grew up, and it was right in the heart of Sussex, which is like southeast England, like almost France, as far as we're concerned here. Okay. So I grew up there, lived there. Well, actually, bizarrely, born in Malaysia. So born in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. My dad was an aerospace engineer, so they traveled a lot when they were young, newly married. So my older brother was born in Nairobi, in Kenya. My middle brother was born in KL, and I was born in KL, which is great when you're going blood donating. My mum was born in Karachi as well, in Pakistan, because her dad did the same thing. So I'm like so ridiculously white. I'm almost translucent, like white. I go red. But then when you do your blood donating thing, and they look at your thing, and you tell them your mum born in Karachi, and they look at you really weird, and then you're born in Malaysia, confuses the heck out of people. So then moved back to Sussex when I was a year old, grew up there in like the countryside. So like think Vicar of Dibley. That's the village I grew up in, that kind of experience. So it was great, loved it, and then moved to Manchester for university, and then stayed up north. So I was in Manchester, got married after uni, lived there for 6 years, moved over to Bradford for 6 years, and then here. So been here for, it'll be 10 years in August.
That's not actually as long as I thought.
You think I'm native now?
Settled. Yeah.
Oh, no. So basically, I can't have a coffee without a biscuit now.
Oh, very good. Yeah, true.
So I'm in, frankly. Yeah, so I love it. Kids love it. Kids at that moment of, it was about 4 years ago, watching the Six Nations, and my eldest son would have been about 14 then. And it was England, Ireland came on the Six Nations, and he looked at me and says, "Dad, I'm sorry, I'm supporting Ireland." And it was that moment of,
he's like, genuinely torn.
Genuinely, I was heartbroken. Like my firstborn son is supporting Ireland, but I'm glad he's gone native, so that's cool.
That's
what can
brilliant.
you do?
And then, so you studied then in Manchester. Is that what you did?
Yep.
Business?
Yep. Yeah.
And what came after that?
So then I went into telecoms. So the telecoms market was booming at the time. This was late 90s, early noughties. Lots of deregulation in the market. So I went into, they called it like business development. It was sales. We were selling to small and medium-sized companies. So I got a real background in sales, in presenting, in communicating, in all of that kind of thing to company directors. So I did that for a number of years. I don't even know how long, maybe 4 or 5 years. And then went to work for the charity sector for a little bit, did some similar kind of stuff within the charity sector, working for a campaigning charity. Did a little bit, bizarrely ended up, I wanted to get out of the telecoms. I've been made redundant a couple of times because of the craziness of the industry. People were trying to float their companies, and it was all a bit mad. Ended up doing some training for a security company, training like ex-military who had got jobs as security guards for like Microsoft and B-Sky-B and Xerox and people like that. So I was training them customer service, like how to be nice to people, which was a slightly weird experience. And then ended up doing security audits of these big blue chip companies and like trying to break into B-Sky-B's offices and stuff like this, which is a little bit bizarre. It's just weird where you end up in your career. You're like, how did I end up in this space?
But also there's communication the whole way through that.
All the way through it. Yeah, it was always people, always face to face. Loving that.
Being a communicator,
learning how to interact with people and connect with people. So did that, then moved over to Bradford to work for a charity in Bradford, really great debt counselling charity. Just did a lot of work for them. Again, same stuff, like all business development. They didn't call it that. They called it, I don't know, something touchy-feely within the charity world that didn't feel like sales, but you're always selling. Did that and then went to work for a church, and then moved over here to work for a church and been doing that So did that for 5 years here, then did a year at Michael's school, doing business development basically.
Yeah.
And then left that and went to work for another church. And did that. And then here.
And here you are. Super. So what would you say through all of that? There, obviously communication and being a communicator is at the helm there.
Yeah.
Would you say that, so what role does that, so I talk about the creative path is never straightforward.
No.
And
No.
that's the beauty of it. But one of the things we also were saying off air was, I guess it's that old saying of don't put all your eggs in one basket, you know, the security of one thing.
Yeah.
I was just discussing with you, even now, like I would say I'm well established, but I still have the fear every month that, you know, the next month isn't going to be what the last one was.
Totally.
But it's all going to fall off the edge of the earth. You're a bit better at riding that wave than I am. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, probably because I've just been on it for so long. So like, you know, I was kind of raised in that classic middle class family. Like dad was working class and came, but then he was an apprentice and then became management. And so we were raised in that kind of classic middle class, go to university. We were the first generation. My elder brother and I both went to university. So go to university, get a well-paid job, be secure. That would be your kind of like, and then, you know, retire at whatever. So I did that, went to university, got a well-paid job with a big established company and was made redundant in 12 months. So that, and like being made redundant, I mean, being called into the office, gather 30 people and say, your job's gone, now clear your desk. It was that kind of, and I'm not sure if Beth had been born, my daughter, either Anne was like 9 months pregnant or I'm not exactly sure, but basically about to have a new child. So that was just a shock. But then thankfully within the industry got a job like the next week. So that was good. Walked into another job, but then 6 months later, exactly the same thing happened again. And these companies, they were trying to cut costs and float and stock price and all that kind of thing. So just literally would lay, you know, 50 people off, 100 people off, just gone. So that taught me, like within 18 months out of university, like, okay, there was no such thing as a secure job anymore.
Yeah.
You know, that's done. And my granddad worked for the same. He worked for British Airways his entire career. And you're like, that doesn't happen anymore. You can't, it's so then having to then become a little bit more aware and not trusting in my job, not trusting in my employer. No, my employer could call me in at any moment and make me redundant. So like, okay, that's not going to work. So that, I suppose that in a way helped me when I went self-employed now to go, actually, do you know what? Being self-employed is no more risky than being in a job. And actually the most important thing I think is doing what you love, doing what you're passionate about, being free to, you know, to do whatever that is. I think so many people stay in jobs because, I don't know, they've got a mortgage or they've got, you know, a particular type of lifestyle and they'll be in jobs, they're miserable and they hate for 40 years. It's like, I would rather take the risk of, you know, not having a lavish lifestyle, but actually doing something that I love 40, 50, 60 hours a week. That's got to be a better trade-off.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about this until now, but we have definitely talked about in the past, whenever my son was doing what's called the transfer test over here, you know, to go to the schools, and how I went to high school. I have to rein myself in whenever I think that people who do well in exams are better than other people. But then there's some people that are just made for education and made for school. And we were talking about how maybe if our boys our kids were different, you know, because I think yours all went to grammar school, did they?
Yeah, they all and part of that because we were fairly naive when we arrived here. Like, so in England, we didn't have this system. It doesn't exist. No transfer.
Is there streaming?
Nope. I mean, I think there is in certain parts of the country, but most of it's comprehensive. So there's very little academic selection unless you want to pay. That was never an option for us. So the idea of academic and academic streaming and what that creates just frustrates the absolute life out of me. Because you're right. What it does is it grades us on such a narrow band of skills. It's like, can you assimilate information really quickly, and can you regurgitate that information in an organized fashion? Well, okay, if you're good at that, brilliant. But when I look at the people I've worked with, the teams that I've built, the people I've recruited, I'm so disinterested in that skill for anything that I've ever done. I've never needed anything. And I'm sure there are jobs where you need that.
Yeah.
But like, no,
but
like
surely the percentage must be quite small.
Oh, it's crazy.
We were talking to two different friends recently, and they both big companies, and they were saying the same thing. Whenever someone comes in and they're looking at CVs, it's like, no, it's not often. It's really very little about the CV. It's like how they communicate, how they fulfill tasks, what their, stickability, and all that kind of thing. But then I guess the other side of that is, I can see how even from an art point of view, you have to show that you can, I guess, draw the trainer the same way that you're meant to draw the trainer in order for them to get 30 pupils through to the next level, because they don't have, schools are at capacity as well. But I still find it baffling that we're at this stage in 2021. Maybe it's just a Northern Irish thing, I think it's actually a global education thing where that is celebrated more than the arts and the music and
it's
poets.
insane,
and especially during COVID.
And I think the thing that drives me up the wall is there is no need with the technology we've got now to have the education system that we have. It's just the whole education system. So unfortunately, our university selection criteria is based on our A levels, and A levels are based on our GCSEs, which are then based on, so it all tiers down, and those are private businesses, and they're not going to do anything to jeopardize their private business. When it's crazy, the idea of a standardized test, it's like the idea that kids are standardized. Kids aren't standardized. This is one of my hobby horses. You've got me on.
Sorry, whoops.
No, but it's all right. But it's the idea that we've made art boring.
I know.
And music boring. Like, how can we possibly make music and art boring? And the reason is because the poor teachers have to teach a particular standardized curriculum to get them through. And it's like, it's art, for heaven's sake. Like, what are we talking about? Like, sorry, go on.
Isn't it also really interesting though too, then, to even just take an art out of that? I know guys who are really hard workers, who are amazing in what they do, and they have been superb in their role, but they can't go higher because they didn't get a 2-1 from a university. And I just think, what is this? Like, where are we? And
it's so narrow-minded.
When they sit with this board of governors or whatever it is in these different places, and like all the board, and they're automatically set aside because that piece of paper. But anyway, that's a whole other.
And it's complete. I mean, I idiotic. I was chatting with a friend of mine who like bombed out of school, hated school, did all that kind of thing, and went back to university at 27 to become an electrical engineer, and now is a fully qualified, highly proficient, expert electrical engineer at 27. And you're like, there's something so fundamentally wrong with the way that we approach all of this stuff and think about all of this stuff. It's just, well,
especially even kids now, my kids with being all these YouTubers, I'm like, if you want to be a YouTuber, that's fine, but as long as you work hard at it.
Exactly. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's tenacity, it's working hard, it's the ability to collaborate. Can you get on with people? Can you communicate?
Can you finish the job?
Exactly. All of those kind of things which are important, rather than, can you assimilate this information quickly and regurgitate it to me? Like,
I know. Well, tell me then on a day, so for whenever you are creating, because I remember a year or two ago, you were meeting a friend of pre-COVID who was also a creative, and you're having like a day of writing. I remember thinking, that's amazing. I'm so glad you're doing that. Tell me what format that takes. So for creatives that are listening who just think, so for me today I'm painting, and it's coming together, it'll be a while, but it's a very much like a painting for me, and I know that I need it. I feel like I need to be creative, because the business stuff takes over sometimes. How does a day roll out for you that is a writing day?
It depends if it's collaboration. So if it's a non-collaboration day and it's just me, then I'll go through so I have a morning ritual, which has been super helpful for me in lockdown. So a morning ritual is, it's really simple. It's like a cup of coffee, like shower, breakfast, dressed, at my desk as early as I can be. So normally 8:15, 8:30. first thing I do is what I call morning pages. So this is from a book called The Artist's Way. I think the book's called, somebody sent me, and all the morning pages, it's like a workbook it's an A4 workbook, and it's basically a brain dump. You just write, you stream of consciousness on the page, which is what my writing coach taught us to do on writing retreats to start off with. And it's just a way of getting out of your head all the things you're worried about, bothered about, things, anything, and it just gets out on the page. And then I do a bit of reading, so something inspirational. So I'm going through the book of Luke, so the Jesus's life from Luke's perspective, just reading that for a bit of inspiration, and then into what I need to do. So then then setting myself this kind of moment of what deep work. I read a really great book called Deep Work by somebody, I can't even remember who it is. It's a scientist talking about the idea of deep work, which is no distraction. So phones off, phones away, everything's away, and I'm just in the moment to write as much as I can without a break. So normally hour and 15 minutes on that, and it's no editing. I'm not reading it through. I'm just getting the story out and just banging that away. And then once I've finished that, stop, go away, have another cup of coffee, come back, then start the editing process. So it literally, my creative process is then just working that through. And normally starting with so if I'm writing one of the short kid stories, one of the Red Door stories, I'll just have an initial idea. So I sit there's a window next to me where I look out on the park, and all the stories are based in the park. So I'll look out on the park and see something and go, right, I'm going to write about that. And even that, not overthinking it.
Yeah.
So just going, right, that's my starting point. Let's go. And then write. And then I think so many times we do this, we overthink things, and we try to get the perfect hook for a story, or the perfect start for this, or and it's like, there's no such thing as perfect, and you just got to start somewhere. So I just start. So there's nothing mystical about that. It's just letting it flow out. And if there isn't anything coming, stop, go for a walk, get moving, do something different. I used to kind of beat myself up a little bit and force it, and like, I will do this, but if nothing's coming, it's just, but there normally is something coming. And what I've started to do now as well, certainly for the shorter stories, is every time I have an idea, I could write about that, or I could write about that, I could write about that, it's literally just write the sentence. So I know when I'm going to coming to write, I've already got the first line. So then I'm away. And once you've got the first line, it's funny, I used to and I still do occasionally, I had a stammer as a teenager. Well, maybe a bit younger than a teenager. And it's very well, I'm saying it's well managed. It's not particularly well managed because it doesn't manifest particularly now, but there's still moments. And it's always on the first line. So I only stammer on the first line when I'm reading something. If I got to read something in public, the first line will trip me up.
Okay.
So I have to get myself in a state to get through that first line. And I feel like that's with my creative process. If I've got the first line, happy days are away. I can just write.
I love writing there. Sorry to interrupt you, but I love that. Now my writing is very different from yours. So mine would be writing, I guess, colloquial, short, blog posts really.
Yeah.
But they always are best when we call it blind writing. I remember doing a writing course as well, and so you actually, even if the typing of the words are gobbledygook,
okay,
you don't stop,
right?
And then you go back to do the editing. You're like, what is that sometimes? But that real blind writing, I love. I know it's not exactly the same as what you're saying, but it is really good to get, because otherwise we're so distracted and we stop and start.
Yeah. There's a really interesting book by Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love.
Magic.
Big Magic.
Magic as well, yeah.
Big Magic. And she did a really good TED talk that she did. But the kind of idea of concept of Big Magic is the idea, and it's a spiritual book, really. There's the idea that there are stories out there, there is inspiration out there, there is paint, there's all out there. And actually our job is not so much to manifest it from inside ourselves, but to capture it in everything that we see around us and then let it flow. And that, for me, that took a lot of pressure off. It was like, actually, I don't have to, get angsty about, I can't create or anything. Like, actually, the creativity comes from external. So
yeah, that's a lovely way to think of it. The other thing you said there was about, you said about the flow, and then the not, you know, if things aren't like, if you don't feeling creative, about just continue taking a break. I remember listening to a podcast years ago. It was whenever podcast was only starting out. I think it's called The Starving Artist, and she had said, or someone was talking about how, I think as creatives, it wasn't even on that, it was maybe actually a business one, and they said, the world isn't going to end if you have a nap. You know, because I think so much of us, especially with me, with my own business and with responsibility, and when the boys are, and this is my long day, I'm like, I better get this done. I better be. And I remember them saying like that everything is not going to fall apart if you decide to have one extra cup of coffee, which cuts in the. Whereas I guess there's, maybe that is, I don't know, maybe that's me just projecting, but maybe that's going back to the education system of like, you must show documentation that you are successful, that you are.
Yes. And it's we have this worship of productivity, and so that we feel like we constantly have to have if we an hour work, we have to produce something so we can show other people or ourselves that we've produced something, where if you want to produce something worthwhile, if you want to produce something deep, the science tells us you have to rest, you have to have downtime so your brain recovers. You just can't. They actually measured your productivity over time, or like your the output of your work, and after a certain time it literally just falls off a cliff. You've got to rest, you've got to recuperate. Editing's slightly different as from the creative process, so I have to you know, get myself in the space of, I am going to edit this, and that for me is that's a graft. That's part of the, you know, grit. Got to get through it. And as much as I hate it, my work is better after I've edited it. Yeah. So you got to do it.
I actually had a blog post that's going out today. It's called Are You Happy? Well, it'll be launched now by the time this goes live, but I'd forgotten to edit it, and I was the same thing. I was like, I think like that's the admin side. I don't want to do that.
And like, it's crazy, and different people have different personalities. So the lady that teaches me writing, she would spend 80% of her time editing. So she would write a poem, and like,
I agree. I think that's about right.
No, that's bonkers.
Well, but poems are maybe different. Poems and short blog posts. I feel like the blog post itself, because it feels like the creative flow is just like bam, 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 bam. And then I guess because I do the blind stuff, it feels like the editing takes.
It takes forever. That long. Yeah. And it is better, but it's just, for me, it's such a graft. Like, she loves it, and I'm like, I can't. So I have to force myself to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is better.
So. Do you know, interesting as well? So I was listening to another podcast, but it was about health, but similar, right? So bear with me. They talked about, it was gut health. It was all about your gut health.
Nice. Okay,
and
cool.
one of the so it was about, you know, how we consume food, what we can consume more of, microfiber, blah, 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 all this sort of thing.
Wow.
Obviously, I'm very scientific myself, and I can't even remember any of what I absorbed, but it made sense at the time. And one of the things they were talking about was, at the very end, he said, don't underestimate the power of rest in your life. So they were talking about lifestyles, they were talking about work, talking about food, talking about the intricacies of inside your body. But I thought it was really interesting at the very end, this doctor said, don't underestimate the power of rest. So similar to what you're saying, you're not, the gut's not productive unless it has rest too. So similar thing.
And in some ways it's really obvious, but I still feel a little bit guilty.
Always do.
And I know that when I'm tired, so I had a bit of time over this last weekend of, you know, thoughts spiraling like doom and gloom. Yeah. And I had to stop myself and go, Owen, you're just knackered.
Yeah.
Like, you've had a really busy week, your head's a bit fried, there's loads of big decisions you've had to make and have to think about and create. You're just tired. Like, don't make any decisions today. Yeah. Like, wait till the morning, have a cup of coffee, have a good night's sleep. And then, funny enough, woke up in the morning and we're like, everything's fine again.
Okay again. Yeah.
Like, nothing changed. It's just like, I wasn't tired anymore. You're like, grief. Okay, fair enough. So it's giving yourself a break, realizing that, particularly you've got young kids in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's tiring, work's tiring, so you have to give yourself rest. You got to switch off, because there's always more work to do. That's the thing.
There is, and that's what I have to tell myself as well about friends that are in offices. I always say, like, their job rolls over to the next day, whereas I like to be tick off the list. Just because I know you, and I feel like I'm able to address this. It's very interesting that you have mentioned about having a stammer, because
Yeah.
there's yourself, Ian Young, who I had on recently,
Okay.
who is strength and conditioning, really successful coach, Abe Sese, who presents on Q Radio.
Right.
Very interesting that Three Meals have touched on that and talked
Really?
about, having a stammer, because
Interesting.
So how did that affect growing up, like fear, and just, I think, having three boys and seeing how I have to constantly encourage them to talk about their insecurities and about their fears? Did you?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I remember it fairly clearly, like late primary school. So maybe like P6, P7. And the way so I went to speech therapy regularly every month. And I remember being bothered by it. Particularly there was things that I wanted to do. So I remember wanting to be in drama groups. I wanted to act, but knowing that I couldn't do it because I knew I would stammer. So I didn't even put myself forward. And it was only actually fairly recently, thinking back, like that was, 30 plus years ago, and thinking about that and kind of going, oh, that's an interesting part of my life and my journey that didn't work. And then I remember being angry about it. And that manifested. I was a fairly big lad in my age group. So the way I dealt with it, which I'm not in any way proud of, but the way I dealt with it was, anyone said anything, I just hit them. So then people stopped saying a kind of it. So in that way, it dealt with it, in a particularly dysfunctional way, but it dealt with it in that process. And I don't even know particularly how it kind of went away. I'm not sure if speech therapy particularly did the job. Maybe it's clearly something happened, because I hardly ever stammer anymore. But I guess I'm not embarrassed about it now, where I would have been. And I would have avoided particular things, particular situations. But it kind of makes me laugh that, my job is communication, and I actually love public speaking. I really enjoy it, actually, which I know it's like one of the, it's one of the most common fears in people, isn't it? And I'm like, I love it. But yeah, so it's just it's a really interesting part of my journey that that must have had an impact as a kid.
Do you think it helped you deal with fear then? Because I always ask people this in the podcast anyway.
No, I don't know, because I don't think it did, because I remember the things that it stopped me doing a lot of stuff I wanted to do. So it's like really silly, even things like, I don't know, but I was in Cubs, and I was a sixer, like the leader of
I know that the boys are in Cubs,
right, your little thing. And I don't know if every Cub pack did this, but certainly our Cub pack did it. And there was a little chant that you had to do, and it was like, I think the Arcala said like, Cubs, do your best, or something. There was almost like a little bit of a back and forth that one sixer did with the Arcala, and then all the other kids did it. And I was called on a couple of times to do it and couldn't get the words out. So then standing amongst 40 or something of my peers and not being able to get the words out, I remember that just being really humiliated, embarrassed, angry. It was probably, looking back, I was probably quite an angry teenager. Like all the sports I played just involved, if I could hit somebody, then I would play that sport. So yeah, quite an angry kid until we dealt with that. Yeah. Whereas
you're actually just like, your temperament reminds me of Michael sometimes. You're a bit of a
chilled. Yeah. And that's taken a lot of therapy, coaching, counseling, work, just doing my own work, doing lots of reading around.
Isn't it true how you just have to do that? I don't hold back now saying about having researched why I am the way that I am, and how I know I have this really strong sense that, so Dad died just before my 8th birthday. So that age between 7 and 8, I've been really delving into and how, and I've talked about in other podcasts and on my own, that is when you become aware of your, it's not just all about you anymore. You realize there's other people that can affect things. So I just feel like that was a very interesting age to have like trauma and loss, but I didn't realize that until I was older.
No, and that's, I mean, everybody has some degree of something. We just pick up stuff in the world. I mean, yours was crazy and tragic at that age, and then it's, if you don't, what I talk to people about is the ability to stop and step away from what you've just said, or step away from what you just thought, and ask yourself, why did I say that? Like what, because that happened. I said that because of something that I believe. Well, what is it I believe that made me say that? And is that a good thing that I believe, or is not a good thing? Is that healthy, or is it not healthy? Is it neutral, or why do I believe that? What has happened in my past that has caused me to believe that and say that? And do I like that about myself? So, and
do I actually believe it? I think we take on these beliefs as well.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that started for me fairly late, I suppose. I probably would have been early 30s when I went to work for a charity, really, really good charity in Bradford. And we did, as a management development tool, we used this book called Now Discover Your Strengths by Marcus Bucking. I don't know, fascinating book. He was a Gallup pollster. So they polled like 1 million people across the world and discovered these like 42, I think it is, strengths that different people had.
Cool.
So you go through it, and then you look at yourself very much from a strength-based model. So I looked at these 5 things. There were 5 particular strengths, and realized that things that people had told me were a problem for me were actually, no, that's a strength. So one of the things is, one of mine was, like, my strongest was something called an activator, which means you're brilliant at starting stuff. You're pretty terrible at finishing stuff. And if you certainly from how that was framed for me was, you're bad, because you can't finish anything. And actually, when within this organization, they realized it and were like, okay, you're really good at that, but actually these other people are really good at bringing order to the chaos that you create. What an amazing team. Let's put the two, because they can't start anything. They'll just be sat around not doing anything. So you start it, you create the chaos, let them come along behind and organize everything. So like it happened, we created an intern program there. And we were talking about it in a management meeting. I just leant across and just said, give it to me, I'll start it. So I started it in like 6 weeks. I started the intern program from nothing, and got people on board, and we had a bunch of interns in there. Now I ran it for about 6 months, and then handed it off to this lady called Lydia, and Lydia took it, and Lydia like made it 10 times better than I was going to make it. She was so organized, really like worked with a coach and brilliant. And now, however many years later, that intern program is in Canada and New Zealand and Australia and across the UK, but it needed somebody to start it.
Brilliant. That actually reminds me of myself. Yeah.
So, and what I loved about the organization was they recognized that and went, that's not a weakness, it's a real strength. So we're going to use that strength, and then we're going to bring Lydia on, and Lydia's strength is to make what you've done even better. And there was and what it does, it means there's no competition. I'm not diminished by Lydia's strength, and Lydia's not diminished by my strength. We complement each other's strengths and go, oh, actually, you're really good at this. You're really good. Well, let's collaborate and work together and use our strengths. We'd go back to the education system. What we try and do is everybody be equal. Like we're not, we're not equal.
You're not, then you're labeled.
Exactly. Everybody's different. Everybody's got a unique way of looking at the world, unique experiences, unique contribution. So I love all that, like, Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram and all of that stuff. And it just helps explain, it gives us language for why we do certain things.
And doesn't it also enrich life? I feel like you live in a bit of a fog. You come out of school and you're like, well, I'm this, this, and this, and I'm not this, this, and this.
Totally. And it's so helpful with raising kids. So when your kids are a bit older, like things like the Enneagram really help me, because, my daughter is like, loves a fight. She just loves it. And if I didn't have language, I would look at that and go, you're just argumentative and you're just a bit aggressive. And actually, she's not. Actually, she learns by, and that's how she displays her passion and who she is about. And then she's taught, when we did the Enneagram together, she was like, you mean not everybody's like this? And I'm like, no, babe, not everybody's like this. And my middle child, my eldest son, is a 9 on the Enneagram, and he's like the opposite. So he's peacemaker and he is calm. And you could label him as kind of disengaged. and lazy, and he's not any of those things. He's really engaged. He's just engaged in a very different way to my daughter, who's engaged in a very different way to my son. And then when you start realizing, you see the world like that, that's really interesting, because I don't see the world like that. So tell me how you, okay, so when this happens, you interpret it like that. Well, I didn't mean that. What I meant was this. And it's just it's just appreciating each other and valuing each other.
Well, in business as well, and in, readers, because your readers are not all going to be the same.
Totally.
Well, same with me and my paintings. How somebody instinctively buys, a £3,000 painting, and then they buy it the next day. Another person might need to see it 30 times.
Yeah.
But it's that thing of we're all different. Totally. And it definitely does enrich life, I think, whenever you understand. Especially for creatives. I think it's really good to know yourself, and as you say, not to get bogged down in what you're maybe not the best, or it's maybe not your best skill.
No, and then you can collaborate with other people.
Pretty much admin, all admin.
Well, that's it. But you've done that by going. You've got Sharon involved and going.
And now I've got Ruth as well.
And for me, there you go. And like Sharon gets excited about organizing it, and you're like, how do you she loves it. You're like, awesome. I hate that.
But I feel like I'm proud that I went for so years kerfuffling my way through.
You paid your dues.
That I had those other people who just helped me do it. But it is interesting. So you're probably going to be reading something at the minute. What are you reading apart from the Book of Luke?
I've just started. Well, I've got two things on the go. So I have kind of like if you like, a personal development side of things, and then fun. Yep. So my personal development.
I like to do both as well. What's yours? So what are yours at the minute?
So my personal development one is called Essentialism.
I have it.
Oh, you have it? I'm about a chapter or so in it. I do audiobooks with those.
I need to get my audiobooks back on. Matthew from Best of Belfast told me, but he sent me it actually.
Okay. So really. But I think you would really enjoy it. And it's about that idea of, it's almost like narrowing your focus, which is part of my downside of my personality is I chase butterflies. I can have an idea every 10 minutes about something new that we could do, which again is a real strength. Great. It's also a real weakness if you don't manage it. So I have to focus. So Essentialism is really helping me of going, right, what is the one thing that I need to do, like for the next however long week, month?
And in life. I thought it was really good for life as well. Just
okay, brilliant.
Stripping back all the noise.
And then my fun book is, I forget what it's called. It's Aaron Morgenstein wrote The Night Circus. I don't know if you read that. The Night Circus it's the last book that gave me a book hangover. And I remember finishing it. My daughter read it first, and then I read it. And I remember finishing it, putting it on my chest like that, and then walking up to her bedroom upstairs, going, "I finished it." And like really kind of like, I want to read. I can't ever read it again. Like for the first time ever. So then she's written a second book called The Starless Sea, I think it's called. So I'm at a chapter in that, and already I'm like, wow, she's just a beautiful, poetic, very vivid writer. So that's
can we talk about, just before we finish up, your style of writing, what genre, because I can imagine, are those books like what's that book? Is it I don't know, it's not sci-fi. You're reading, what's this?
Fantasy. That's kind of like a fantasy-esque book. And
it'll be like detailed, but is it otherworldly and stuff?
Yes,
as well?
Always. Yes. I don't like for me, if a book's not got a dragon in it.
Right. So this is why I want you to tell the audience.
What's the point? So I write primarily for two. I write for the very little kids. Those are the rhyming stories, like Dr. Seuss rhyming stories. Mm-hmm. So they're always slightly fantasy in it, whether it's animals talking and coming to life or dragons or whatever. There's that. And then my young adult novel is that's world building. That's a different world. Dawnhaven, magic. There's not a dragon in it. I'm not saying anything because who knows what might happen I've got 5 books planned. So I've written, the first book's out. Second book is in the first draft is done. So fantasy, swords, all of that. But I
also relationships and
because
totally a very real
banter. Yeah, exactly. And I write for fun, so I want it to be fun. Mm-hmm. I want it to be engaging. I want it to be exciting. Like it's like TV shows. My wife like wants to watch medical dramas and like real life 24 hours in A&E, and I'm like, I don't want to watch that. If I want to watch TV, it needs to be escapism. It needs to be silly. I want to watch Mary Poppins. That's what I want to watch. Like, come on.
I feel like that's a line we should finish on.
I want to watch Mary Poppins. I'm the person to watch the Disney Channel in my house.
Brilliant.
And I'm okay with
our
that.
friend Stefan, he's a producer as well, and he's the same at Disney. He's like, what? You haven't watched every single one.
Exactly. Yeah. Smart man. That's where the magic
tell
is.
Me then where people can find you.
So Amazon, so if you go to Amazon, the books Red Door Stories and Ariella and the Curse of Dawnhaven is the first one, and then Instagram, Owen Crane on Instagram.
Brilliant.
And then YouTube. I've actually read some of the books on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube, Red Door Stories.
Well, that's little Jacob. I've seen him watching
yes, Jacob watches them.
I need to do that for Abraham.
Yeah, there you go. He'll love them. And it's me reading to them. So apparently I have quite a, what did somebody say? Melodic voice. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, Brilliant. You can consume it any way you like.
So that Owen Crane on YouTube?
No, Red Door Stories.
Sorry, Red Door Stories.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I could chat.
It's been a joy.
I know it always is. The only thing we're missing is coffee. Did you have your coffee in this?
I have. I finished it. My new rainbow mug.
Oh, it's beautiful. I've got my. We're both supporting local ceramists.
Come on, we're like local artists. Let's go.
I'll never forget that meeting that we had, because I think we will do. No, we will be doing our collaboration.
We did. I had the book designer nagging me at the weekend, like, when are we doing that? I'm like,
right,
later, September.
Okay, we'll get it September. I think this will be. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. We have the finds of a very beautiful piece.
Very beautiful.
And also, that one of the meetings. Remember, we actually just had like a gallon of coffee. I'll never forget. Like, buzzing all the rest of the day. I'm going to go and have my coffee now. But thank you for sharing your wisdom and being so honest. Thank you everybody for watching and for listening. It really is a joy to be able to share people's stories and to highlight them and just to get into some nitty-gritty conversations. So if you subscribe, you will get all the rest of the podcasts episodes, and you can find me in Ali Harte, ALYHARTE, on most social media channels. If you Google it, I think you'll find me. Okay, thanks for listening, and I will see and hear you, watch you, listen, don't know, on the other side. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed the episode, I would really appreciate some feedback, or for you to hit subscribe so that you get all the content every week in your inbox. And if you would like to check out my website, it's alihart.com, especially if you were thinking about needing some mentoring sessions, because I have openings coming up in the summer. Thanks for watching and listening, and I will see you on the other side.